To start out today, you need to grab your math journal, page 232, and complete this first problem. You're trying to find the area of each of these rectangles. Pause your video while you work. Alright, so you'll notice that the area of this rectangle is by counting the squares 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This one would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. That seemed like an awful lot of squares to count. There has to be an easier way. And in fact, there is. If you notice, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 squares along the bottom, and I have 2 rows of those squares. And 4 times 2 is 8. Let's see if it works for this one. 3 across the base, 3 rows total, 3 times 3 equals 9. Excellent. How about this one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, again, 6 times 5 is 30. You're going to be working with this formula throughout today. So again, we'll be developing a formula for area of any rectangle, and remember that squares are included in rectangles. Please pause your video to work on these multiplication problems. 6 times 7 is 42, 32, 63, 48, and 36. Pause your video. Remember, with zeros in multiplication, you add them on. Pause your video. 35 with 2 zeros, 24 with 2 zeros, 48 with 2 zeros, 27 with 3 zeros, 56 with 3 zeros. Last but not least, these are a little more tricky. Try to do them mentally, and then pause your video. Think of what kind of tricks you use to solve these in your head, and come share those tricks with Mrs. Becker. So today we have to remember some different language. The length of the base, the bottom of a rectangle, is either called the length or the base. Often we see this as L or B. So this is referring to the bottom or the base. It could also refer to this part up here. This would also be the base if you flipped it over. Both of them are the same length, you'll notice. Next, we talk about the width or the height. They both mean the same thing. It's talking about what length is going up. We would either say that's a W for width or an H for height. Often when we're talking about base, we match that up with height, and when we're talking about length, we match that up with width. Both are the same thing though, and you'll see it often referred to both ways. Again, the base is talking about the top or the bottom, and the width or the height is talking about the distance from each base. So, remember these from before? We're going to fill in a table to help us with that number model. So for rectangle A, we had 1, 2, 3, 4. And actually, I wouldn't get in the habit anymore of counting the inside. It's very important that you count along the edge. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then counting along the edge this way, 1, 2 is the number of rows or the height. Remember we said earlier that the number model could then be 4 times 2 equals 8, with a total amount of squares equaling 8. I want you to be careful about counting inside as opposed to along the edge. So again, count along the edge, and that'll become important later on when you are doing some of the problems on the next page. Try B and C following this same pattern and come check these answers with Mrs. Becker. Again, we said the area of a rectangle equals length of the base times the width, and this is called a formula. So it can be abbreviated as A equals L times W. Remember, length was the L and width was the W. But we can also write it as base times height. Remember, these mean the same things, and these letters are just variables, which means they can stand for any number that I put in here. For example, if my length is 5 and my width is 2, the L in this problem equals 5, the W in this problem equals 2, and the area, or the A in this problem, equals 10. But that's not necessarily going to be the case every problem. These letters just represent these numbers for this particular problem. So again, we're going to be doing what you did on the last page to work on this. I want to go down to say this one, F, because I want to make sure you realize that it's important to count along the edge. Because if I was just counting right here inside, well, those would be half boxes. But if I count along the bottom, 1, 2, 3, that's 3 squares worth instead of what would equal 1.5. So again, I'm counting along the bottom. Let me change my color here so you can tell. So for F, the length of the base is 1, 2, 3, because I'm counting along the edge. So the length of the base would be, right here, length of the base, 3. And then the width or the height, again counting along. Ooh, here is where I have half. So I have half, 1.5, 2.5. Oh, notice I'm counting along the edge again. I have another half. So half, 1 plus a half is 1.5, plus another 1 is 2.5, plus a half gets me to 3. So the length of my width is 3. If I would actually count the squares, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because that equals a whole, 8, because that equals a whole, 9, because that equals a whole. And I can check my answer because I should be able to do 3 times 3 equals 9. So this side and this side should always match up. And while you do your counting today, especially with like G and I, make sure you're counting along the edge. For example, this is half of a square, 1 full square, and half of a square, even though it's only a quarter right here. I'm not counting the inside right now, I'm just counting along the edge. And this line went halfway through. So I have half, 1, and half. Half, 1, and half are going to equal, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, Riley is just causing all sorts of problems today. Half, 1, and half will equal 2, oopsies, wrong one, I gave you the answer, 2, and then you'll do the same thing going up. Make sure you count the actual line, not what's inside for these 2 columns. Then check your work when you're done with this table. And finally, you'll go to the next page, page 234, to work on coordinate grids. Remember that you always go over first and then up for everything. Over and then up. So A would be 2 over and 6, oopsies, I'm sorry, 2 over and 6 up. Putting it right about here. because I went over first with the first number and then up. Do number 1 and come check, and then do number 2 and come check. I, for example, would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over, and 7 up. So 5 over, 7 up. Then you'll be working on math boxes.